Kyle walked through the glowing corridors of Elysium 7 with a quiet sense of purpose. The floating city hung above the clouds of an alien world, its tall spires shimmering with artificial lights that reflected off the vast domes filled with rare plants. Kale's footsteps were soft, almost lost in the hum of machinery and the distant chatter of other citizens, but he hardly noticed the background noise. Today, his mind was elsewhere, focused on something small yet meaningful. In his small laboratory, he carefully examined a flower he had discovered on a recent expedition. Its petals were thin and translucent, glimmering with a faint liquid-like light that seemed to pulse gently in his hand. Kale had never seen anything like it. Scientists from other colonies would have called it a marvel of bioengineering, but to Kale it was more than that. It was beautiful, simple, alive. He thought of Leora, the engineer who worked on the starships that connected Elysium 7 to the outer colonies. She was brilliant, precise and often distant, her mind always focused on the next calculation or repair. People admired her skill, but few dared approach her beyond formal conversation. Kale, however, found himself drawn to her quiet intensity, her thoughtful pauses, the rare smiles that hinted at a softer side. Kyle wrapped the delicate flower in a piece of soft cloth, taking care not to damage it. He wasn't sure what he hoped to achieve by giving it to her. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. It was just a flower after all, and in a city obsessed with technology and efficiency, simple gestures were often overlooked. Still, he felt a flutter of hope as he carried it through the crowded streets toward the engineering bay. When he arrived, Leora was bent over a console, her hands moving deftly as she repaired a small section of a starship engine. Sparks flew in the dim light and the smell of ozone hung in the air. Kale hesitated at the doorway, unsure how to begin. His voice caught when he finally spoke. I found something I thought you might like." Leora looked up, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly in curiosity. She had always noticed small details that others missed. Kale stepped closer, holding out the wrapped flower. Her brow lifted as she accepted it, her fingers brushing his lightly. For a brief moment, the hum of machinery and distant voices faded, leaving only the quiet presence of two people in a shared moment. "I didn't expect this," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. She held the flower carefully, turning it in her hands, examining the glow that seemed to respond to her touch. Kale's chest tightened. He hadn't expected much, perhaps a polite smile or a simple nod. But her words, her gentle acknowledgement, felt heavier than any reward he could have imagined. They stood there in silence for a few more moments, the city around them continuing its endless rhythm. Kale realized that in this small gesture, something larger had begun. It was not just about the flower. It was about noticing someone, taking a risk to show kindness in a world that often overlooked such things. Leora, for her part, seemed to understand this too, her usual guarded expression softening into something warmer. As Kale turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of her watching him with a faint smile. He felt lighter than he had in months, carrying a quiet joy that made the corridors of Elysium 7 seem brighter than usual. That small connection, simple and unassuming, had already begun to change him. Walking back to his lab, Kale couldn't stop thinking about Leora. The city was vast, full of challenges and responsibilities, but this moment reminded him of the beauty in small human acts. Even in a place dominated by machines, calculations, and efficiency, there was room for wonder. A flower, a kind word, a shared smile. These were the things that made life worth living. Kale placed the remaining flowers he had collected on the lab table, their soft glow filling the room. He realized that giving the flower was not just about Leora. It was about hope, connection, and the belief that humans, even in the far reaches of space, could create moments of warmth in an otherwise cold world. For the first time in a long while, Kale felt that something extraordinary could begin from something as simple as a flower. And somewhere in the city, he knew, Leora held that small bloom in her hands, and perhaps for the first time in a long time, allowed herself to feel something beyond the data and calculations of everyday life. After that first small encounter, Kale could not stop thinking about Leora. Every time he wandered through the biodomes or past the workshops of Elysium 7, his mind drifted to her quiet smile, and the way her eyes had softened as she held the glowing flower. He had never imagined that a simple gesture could have such an effect, yet it had opened a door to something new, something unexpected. Leora, meanwhile, found herself replaying the moment again and again. She had always been careful to focus on her work, on the starships, on the schedules that kept the city running smoothly. But now, in quiet moments, she caught herself glancing toward Kale's lab, wondering about the rare flowers he nurtured and the person who had gone out of his way to give her one. For the first time in a long while, she felt curiosity not only for knowledge, but for someone else's presence. The following days, their paths began to cross more often. Elysium 7 was a busy place with people rushing from one task to another, and yet, Kale and Leora found themselves drawn into small conversations whenever they could. Kale shared his observations about plant growth, the unusual light patterns on certain alien petals, and the delicate balance of ecosystems he was trying to recreate. Leora, in turn, explained the intricacies of starship engines, the careful calculations required to maintain propulsion systems, and the endless problem-solving that kept the city connected to distant colonies. Their conversations began simply, but they grew richer with each meeting. Kale realized that Leora noticed things he had overlooked, how sunlight filtered through the biodome glass, how certain machines created subtle vibrations that affected plant growth. Leora discovered that Kale had an unusual ability to see patterns in nature, to predict how a plant would react to its environment, almost as if he could speak with them. It was fascinating for both, and they started to look forward to these exchanges more than either would admit. One afternoon, Kyle invited Leora to see the newest plant he had been cultivating. It was a small section of the lab transformed into a miniature forest, filled with luminescent plants that glowed gently in the dim light. Leora walked carefully through the narrow pathways, her fingers brushing against soft petals and leaves, her eyes wide with quiet wonder. "It's incredible," she said, her voice low so as not to disturb the fragile life around her. "I've never seen anything like this." "How did you even find these plants?" Kale smiled a little shyly. "It's a long story," he said. "Some of them are from other worlds. Some I grew from seeds I collected here. I like to see how they adapt." Leora nodded, stepping closer to a flower that glimmered with shades of green and blue. "It's so peaceful," she murmured. "Being here makes the city feel farther away somehow." Kyle realized then that their connection was more than simple friendship. Sharing these moments allowed both of them to see parts of life that were easily forgotten in the rush of daily responsibilities. It was as if the plants themselves had created a space for understanding, for trust, for a sense of shared wonder. As days passed, Kale and Leora began to work together on small projects. Kale would suggest ways to improve the biodome's lighting, to help the plants thrive, and Leora would devise mechanical adjustments to ensure the temperature and humidity remained stable. Their collaboration was quiet at first, almost tentative, but soon it became seamless, each respecting the other's expertise while learning from one another. People in the city began to notice the change. Kale, usually reserved and absorbed in his own work, walked taller, spoke with more confidence. Leora, who had always kept herself distant, seemed more relaxed, more willing to share her thoughts with those around her. There was a subtle shift in both of them, a reflection of how small acts of kindness and shared curiosity could transform lives. One evening, as the city lights reflected in the biodome's glass and the alien flowers shimmered softly around them, Kale handed Leora another small bloom. She took it with a quiet smile, her eyes meeting his. Neither spoke immediately, but in that silence there was understanding, trust, and a growing warmth that neither could deny. The flower was still small, still simple, but it had become something more. It was a bridge, a symbol of connection in a city that often prized efficiency over emotion, work over wonder, and as Kale watched Leora hold it carefully, he realized that this bond, born from something so delicate, could grow into something extraordinary. For the first time, both of them began to understand that life in Elysium 7 was not only about survival or achievement. It was about noticing, caring, and sharing moments that mattered. The city might hum with machines and calculations, but here, in the soft glow of alien flora and the warmth of mutual respect, Kale and Leora discovered the simple truth that sometimes the smallest gestures could change everything. The days on Elysium 7 passed quietly at first. Kyle and Leora continuing their small routines and shared moments. But the calm of the city was fragile, and it did not last. One morning, alarms rang through the floating spires, echoing across the biodomes and workshops. Red lights flashed as a fleet of alien drones appeared in the sky above the city. They were sleek, black and mechanical, moving with speed and precision that left the city's automated defenses struggling to respond. People rushed to their stations, sending alerts to the control centers and preparing whatever defenses they could. Panic spread quickly. Elysium 7 had never faced such an attack before. The drones moved not just to gather resources, but to assess the city's capabilities, scanning every structure and corridor with glowing sensors. Kyle and Leora were in the middle of the biodome, tending to the plants. Kyle's heart raced as he watched the glowing petals flicker under the emergency lights. "We need to do something," he said, though his voice was tight with fear. "These drones, they're not just scouting. They'll destroy everything if we don't act." Leora's mind, as always, went straight to solutions. "We need to protect the biodome and the energy cores," she said. "If the drones reach the main generators, the city could fail entirely. We can't just wait." She grabbed Kale's arm, pulling him toward a corner where a console allowed them to monitor the drone's movement. Kale looked around at the delicate plants, his life's work hanging in the balance. For the first time, he felt the weight of responsibility not just for the city, but for these fragile forms of life. "There might be a way to use the plants," he said slowly, thinking aloud. "Some of them, they react to light and emit energy in ways the drones' sensors might not handle." Leora raised an eyebrow. "You mean the glowing flowers?" Kale nodded. "Yes. If we can amplify their light and create a pattern that interferes with their scanning, maybe we can slow them down. Confuse them at least long enough for the city defenses to adjust." She studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. "It's risky, but it might work. We'll need to combine your knowledge of the plants with my modifications to the energy grid." Working side by side, they began their improvisation. Kale carefully prepared the flowers, arranging them to maximize their glow, while Leora connected the biodome's energy circuits to amplify the light pulses. Sparks flew, wires hummed, and the room filled with an unusual glow as the combined systems came alive. Their hands brushed several times, and though neither spoke of it, there was a quiet trust in the way they moved together, anticipating each other's actions. When they activated the system, a brilliant wave of light spread across the biodome. The drones above hesitated, their sensors struggling to interpret the glowing patterns. Some paused, others retreated slightly, giving the city's defense systems just enough time to respond. Kale and Leora exchanged a quick glance, their shared relief mingled with adrenaline. But the victory was temporary. The drones adapted quickly, reprogramming their sensors and advancing toward the biodome again. Kale's heart sank as he realized that their experiment, though effective, would not hold for long. "We need a stronger plan," he said. "Something more. Something that will force them back completely." Leora's eyes met his, steady and determined. "Then we find it, together." She grabbed his hand, the same gentle touch from before, but now filled with urgency. Kale felt a surge of courage. They were no longer just two individuals trying to survive. They were a team combining knowledge, skill, and trust. The drone's movement grew more aggressive, but Kyle noticed something. The smallest flower he had given Leora, the first one, reacted differently than the others. Its glow was stronger, almost as if it sensed the danger and responded. An idea formed in his mind. That flower. It could guide the energy pattern. If we focus everything on it, it might create a shield strong enough to repel them. Leora nodded, and they quickly rearranged the setup, connecting the plant to the energy circuits and calibrating the light to pulse in precise intervals. When they activated it, the glow expanded outward, creating a barrier of shimmering light. The drones struck it, but their sensors could not penetrate the shifting patterns. Slowly, the swarm began to retreat, confused and unable to adapt fast enough. Kale and Leora stood together, breathing heavily, watching the last of the drones vanish into the sky. The biodome was safe, the plants unharmed, and the city had bought precious time. They did not speak immediately, only shared a look that said everything: fear, relief, pride, and the growing bond that had carried them through the chaos. For the first time, Kale understood that their connection was more than a simple gesture of a flower. It had become a source of strength, a reminder that even in a universe filled with dangers and unknowns, Humans could face challenges together, and perhaps even triumph against impossible odds. After the drone attack, Elysium 7 was tense. The city had survived, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the fleet returned. Kale and Leora met in the biodome once again, surrounded by the soft glow of the alien plants. The quiet beauty of the place contrasted sharply with the chaos that had erupted just hours before. They both understood that their previous improvisation could only hold the drones off temporarily. If the city was to survive long-term, they would need a more permanent solution. Kale looked at Leora, determination in his eyes. The flowers, they can't just block the drones. We need something stronger, something that can actively repel them. Leora nodded, her mind already racing with ideas. We can combine your plants with the city's energy grid. If we synchronize the light pulses with a feedback loop, we could create a shield that adapts to the drone's sensors. She paused, considering the scale of what she was suggesting. It will be dangerous. If we miscalculate, we could overload the grid or damage the biodome. Kale smiled faintly. Then we won't miscalculate. We'll do it together. He felt a surge of courage as he spoke. Their hands met briefly, a quiet affirmation that they were no longer working alone. Together, they could achieve more than either could alone. For the next several days, they experimented with different combinations of plant species and energy output. Kale observed the flowers, noting which ones emitted the most powerful pulses and how they interacted with one another. Leora adjusted the circuits, fine-tuning the connections and calculating the precise timing needed to create a stable shield. They worked late into the nights, the soft glow of the plants their only light, their conversations quiet and focused. As they worked, they began to understand each other on a deeper level. Kale admired Leora's sharp mind and courage under pressure, and Leora grew to respect Kale's patience, intuition, and careful attention to detail. The bond between them deepened, not through words alone, but through shared effort, trust, and the quiet understanding that each had found someone who complemented them perfectly. One evening, after another long day of testing, Kale noticed that one flower in particular responded differently when connected to the circuits. Its glow intensified dramatically, sending pulses in a pattern that seemed almost intelligent. "This one," he said, pointing to the flower. "It reacts faster than the others. If we focus the shield through it, the effect could be much stronger." Leora studied the flower carefully. "It's perfect," she said. "We'll use it as the central node, and the other plants can amplify the signal. If we time it right, the shield could adapt in real time to any attack." They spent the next several hours integrating the central flower into the system, connecting dozens of smaller plants and adjusting the grid's energy output. Sparks flew occasionally, and the air hummed with electricity and light. Despite the danger, neither of them hesitated. They trusted each other completely, and the shared responsibility made them stronger. When the system was finally ready, they stood together and activated it. A brilliant glow spread across the biodome, pulsating rhythmically. The light formed a dome of shimmering energy that expanded outward, visible even from the city's observation decks. Kale and Leora watched with bated breath as the feedback loop began to stabilize. The moment was tense. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then in the distance, the drones appeared again. They moved toward Elysium 7, but as they approached the shield, their sensors began to fail. The lights confused their targeting systems, and some drones faltered mid-flight, retreating slightly. The shield responded instantly, adjusting its pulses to maintain control over the swarm. Kale felt a rush of relief and triumph. "It's working," he whispered. Leora's face lit up with a rare smile, pride and joy shining in her eyes. The drones attempted several more passes, but the adaptive shield held firm, repelling them each time. The city's defenses, now aided by the plant-powered system, began to regain confidence. Citizens watched from a distance, seeing proof that human ingenuity, cooperation, and even simple acts of care, like the one that had brought Kale and Leora together, could overcome even advanced alien technology. As the night settled over the floating city, Kyle and Leora stood side by side, watching the last of the drones retreat beyond the clouds. Neither spoke immediately, only holding hands briefly, feeling the quiet satisfaction of their success. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and the unknown together, and they had triumphed. in the soft glow of the biodome surrounded by the glowing plants. Kale realized that their bond had grown stronger than he could have imagined. The flower he had given Leora long ago was no longer just a symbol of a simple gesture. It had become a catalyst for courage, teamwork, and trust. And for Leora, the realization was the same. They had discovered something extraordinary in each other, something that could endure even the greatest challenges. For the first time, Elysium 7 felt not only safe but alive. And Kale and Leora understood that together, they could face whatever the universe sent their way. Days passed after the successful defense of the city, but Kale and Leora knew that peace was only temporary. The drones had retreated, but the fleet could return at any moment stronger and smarter than before. The city's leaders worked tirelessly to repair systems and fortify defenses, but Kale and Leora understood that true security required more than walls and alarms. It required ingenuity, adaptability, and courage. Kale spent hours studying the glowing flower that had become the central node of their shield. Its pulsing light seemed almost alive, responding to their touch and the energy of the circuits. Leora examined the engineering behind it, thinking of ways to enhance the shield's efficiency and expand its reach to cover more of the city. Together, they began to devise a plan not just to defend Elysium 7, but to turn the city's natural resources and human creativity into a permanent safeguard. Their work was intense. Late into the night, they adjusted circuits, tested different plant combinations, and simulated attacks. Sparks flew, wires hummed, and the air was thick with the smell of ozone and wet earth from the biodome. Kale and Leora moved seamlessly together, anticipating each other's actions, communicating without words. Their bond had grown stronger than either had imagined, a quiet force that kept them focused and calm amid uncertainty. One evening, while testing a new configuration, the city's alarm rang out again. A smaller group of drones had returned, probing the city's defenses. Unlike the first attack, these drones moved with unpredictable patterns, attempting to bypass the shield's coverage. Kale's heart raced. "They're learning," he said, his voice tense. "We need to act quickly." Leora's expression was steady, determined. "Then we adapt faster. We can use the flower as a beacon, create a moving pulse that guides the shield to intercept them wherever they go." She moved to the controls, her fingers flying over the console as she recalculated the energy distribution. Kyle adjusted the plants, aligning their pulses with Leora's new pattern. The glowing light from the biodome intensified, spreading outward in waves that danced across the city. The drones hesitated as they approached, their sensors struggling to keep up with the shifting patterns. Kale and Leora held their breath, watching the drones falter and retreat again, just enough to prevent damage to the city. But this time, one drone broke through the perimeter, its sensors locked onto the biodome. Kyle reacted instinctively, directing a surge of energy through the central flower. The light flared brilliantly, momentarily blinding the drone's sensors. Leora adjusted the circuits simultaneously, creating a feedback loop that sent the drone tumbling away from the biodome. The city's citizens watched from a distance, witnessing a new kind of defense, one powered not just by machines, but by plants, ingenuity, and the collaboration of two people who refused to give up. Their courage inspired others, and soon volunteers from the city joined Kyle and Leora, helping to monitor systems, maintain circuits, and assist with the plants. After the drones were repelled, Kale and Leora collapsed on a bench in the biodome, exhausted but exhilarated. The glowing flowers bathed them in soft light, their pulses slowing as if to match the rhythm of the two humans. Kale turned to Leora, a quiet smile on his face. "We did it," he said. Leora smiled back, her eyes reflecting the luminescent glow. "We did, together." In that moment they realized something important. The drones could come again, perhaps in larger numbers, but the bond between them, their trust and their combined creativity, was stronger than any threat. They had discovered that human courage and ingenuity, guided by empathy and cooperation, could achieve extraordinary results, even against technology that seemed far beyond their understanding. Kale reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flower, identical to the one he had first given Leora. He held it out to her and she took it, smiling softly. It was no longer just a simple gift. It was a symbol of what they had built together, a partnership, a hope and a reminder that even in a dangerous, high-tech world, small acts of care and courage could have enormous consequences. As they sat side by side, surrounded by the glowing plants, Kale realized that this city, their work, and their bond were connected in a way that could shape the future. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, and they had emerged stronger. Leora, looking at him with quiet admiration, understood the same truth. Together, they could face whatever challenges the universe sent their way. The night stretched on, peaceful for the first time in days, and the two of them remained in the biodome, talking softly, planning quietly, and feeling the shared strength of their connection. In the heart of Elysium 7, amid glowing flowers and humming circuits, Kale and Leora had discovered something timeless: courage, creativity, and the extraordinary power of human partnership. The days following their victory passed quietly, but Kale and Leora both knew that it would not last. The drones had retreated, but their fleet was vast and intelligent. It was only a matter of time before a larger attack would come. Elysium 7's leaders worked tirelessly to strengthen the city, but Kale and Leora realized that even walls and alarms could not protect the floating city forever. The only true defense would be innovation, teamwork, and human courage. Kale returned to the biodome, examining the glowing flowers that had saved the city multiple times. Their gentle pulses reflected the calm he longed for, but his mind was restless. Leora joined him quietly, her eyes scanning the plants with focused intensity. "I've been thinking," she said softly. "If the fleet returns with more advanced drones, our current shield might not hold them off completely." Kale nodded. "We need a way to make the shield stronger, faster, and smarter. Something that can react before the drones even reach the city." Leora considered this. "We can combine the plants with the city's energy grid in a more dynamic way. The flowers react to energy naturally, and if we use the right combination, they can create a moving defense, not just a dome, but a protective field that adapts in real time." Kale's eyes lit up. "We can do it. We just need time to prepare and test it." For several days they worked tirelessly. Kale observed each flower, noting how the luminescence changed under different conditions. Leora adjusted circuits, recalculated energy flows, and experimented with timing patterns. They slept little and ate less, but their shared focus gave them strength. Each challenge they faced only deepened their bond, and their confidence in each other grew. They no longer worked as two separate people, but as a single team, moving in unison, anticipating each other's thoughts and actions. One evening, as they tested a new configuration, the city's alarm rang again. A fleet of drones appeared in the sky, larger and more organized than before. Their movement was precise, and they emitted a low, mechanical hum that vibrated through the city's spires. Kyle's heart pounded. "They're coming faster and stronger," he said, glancing at Leora. Leora's gaze was steady. "Then we act faster." She directed him to adjust the plants while she worked on the energy circuits. Sparks flew and the air hummed as the system powered up. The central flower pulsed brightly, sending energy through the network of plants and amplifying the shield. The drones advanced, their sensors scanning for weaknesses. Kale and Leora held their positions, watching the pulsing glow of the biodome grow brighter and stronger. The shield moved, expanded, and adapted, blocking the drones' approach. Some drones faltered, retreating slightly, while others were pushed back entirely. But the challenge grew. A group of drones broke through the outer perimeter, moving directly toward the biodome. Kale's pulse quickened. "We need to focus the central flower," he shouted. Leora reacted instantly, rerouting the energy and synchronizing the pulses. The flower flared brilliantly, sending a wave of light that disrupted the drone's sensors. The machines staggered, their precise movements failing, and one by one they were pushed back. Kyle felt a surge of relief, but he knew this was only part of the battle. "We have to hold it," he said, eyes fixed on the approaching drones. Leora nodded, her fingers flying over the controls, adjusting the energy flow with precision. The shield shimmered and pulsed, moving with an intelligence that seemed alive, adapting to each new attack. For the first time, Kale realized the true power of their creation. It was not just the plants or the circuits, it was their shared determination, their courage, and their ability to work together under pressure. The drones were formidable, but they could not match the ingenuity of two humans who refused to give up. Finally, after what felt like hours, the drones retreated. The fleet disappeared beyond the clouds, unable to overcome the adaptive shield. Kyle and Leora slumped against a bench in the biodome, exhausted but victorious. The glowing flowers bathed them in gentle light, and for a moment the city felt safe once more. Kyle reached for Leora's hand, holding it tightly. "We did it," he whispered. Leora squeezed his hand in return, her eyes reflecting the soft glow around them. "We did," she said. "Together." In the quiet that followed, they understood something extraordinary. The city had survived because of their courage, creativity, and trust in each other. The simple act that had started it all, a flower Kale had given Leora, had grown into something far greater. It had sparked a bond, inspired teamwork, and shown that even in a universe full of danger, humans could achieve remarkable things. As the night stretched over Elysium 7, Kale and Leora remained in the biodome, watching the gentle pulses of the flowers and feeling the strength of their shared connection. They had faced fear, danger, and the unknown, and they had triumphed. And they knew that whatever the universe sent next, they would face it together, stronger than ever. The days after the drone attacks were filled with rebuilding and preparation. Elysium 7 had survived, but the city was stronger, smarter, and more united than before. Kale and Leora worked side by side, not just on the biodome, but on improving the city's entire defense system. Their adaptive shield had proven its worth. But they knew that true security came from constant innovation, teamwork, and the human spirit. The two walked through the biodome one evening, the glow of the alien flowers illuminating their path. The plants swayed gently in artificial breezes, their soft pulses reflecting the calm that had finally settled over the city. Kale held a small flower in his hand, the first one he had given Leora. It was still glowing faintly, a quiet reminder of how everything had begun. Leora looked at him and smiled. "It's amazing to think how far we've come," she said. "A simple flower, and now, look at this place." "Look at us," Kyle smiled back. "I never imagined it would grow into something like this. Not just the shield, but us, together." They continued walking, discussing new ideas for expanding the city's safety measures, blending technology with nature, and finding ways for humans and plants to coexist more fully. But beneath the conversation, there was a shared understanding. They had discovered something far more important than any invention. They had discovered trust, courage, and the power of working together to create something meaningful. The sun began to rise, casting golden light across the floating city. Kale and Leora paused at the edge of the biodome, watching as the city awakened. Starships glided between spires. Citizens moved through streets with purpose, and the glow of the biodome plants mixed with the warm morning light, creating a scene of quiet harmony. Kale held Leora's hand gently, just as she had once held his in a moment of trust. "We've done something incredible here," he said softly. "But more than that, we've learned what humans are capable of when we work together." Leora nodded, her eyes bright. "We faced fear, danger, and the unknown, and we didn't give up. We used what we had, our minds, our courage, our care for each other, and we made a difference. That's what humans do. That's who we are." They stood together in silence for a few moments, feeling the quiet strength of their connection. Around them, the biodome thrummed with life, and the city hummed with renewed energy. Kale realized that the smallest act, a single flower, a gentle gesture, had grown into something extraordinary. It had sparked trust, bravery, and hope, and it had reminded everyone that humanity's true power lay not just in technology or strength, but in empathy, creativity, and cooperation. Later, Kale led Leora to a small platform overlooking the city. He placed the glowing flower on a pedestal he had prepared. "This is for you," he said, "a reminder of where it all began, and what we can achieve when we care for each other." Leora bent down to examine the flower, her fingers brushing its petals. "It's beautiful," she said softly, "not because of the glow, but because of what it represents. Courage, trust, hope, and you." She looked up at Kale, her eyes filled with warmth and understanding. Kale smiled, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. They had faced uncertainty and danger together, and they had succeeded. But more importantly, they had discovered something timeless, that humans, even in the farthest reaches of space, could create connection, build trust, and inspire one another. The city around them seemed to celebrate their triumph. Lights blinked across the spires, Starships glided through the skies, and the hum of Elysium 7 felt alive with possibility. Kale and Leora stood side by side, holding hands, feeling the steady pulse of the biodome beneath their feet. The glowing flowers reflected the bond they had built, the courage they had shown, and the hope they carried for the future. As the sun fully rose, casting its warm light over the floating city, Kale spoke again. "I didn't expect anything when I gave you that flower," he said quietly. Leora smiled, squeezing his hand. "I didn't expect this either," she replied. "But I'm glad it happened." And in that simple acknowledgement, everything changed. The city was safe, the plants thrived, and two humans had discovered the extraordinary power of kindness, courage, and partnership. The universe was still vast, mysterious, and full of challenges, but Kale and Leora now knew that no matter what came next, they could face it together. Together they turned to watch the city awaken fully, the light of the rising sun mixing with the glow of the biodome. For the first time in a long while, everything felt right. The simple act of giving a flower had led to friendship, trust, and a shared purpose that would endure. And as the light spread across Elysium 7, Kale and Leora knew that their journey was only beginning. Together, as humans, as partners, as creators of hope in a universe full of possibilities.